Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the surprisingly unsettling world of ancient Greece, a place you probably only know from those glossy history books, full of marble statues and toga parties. But trust me, beneath that pristine white marble surface, things got a little weird. We're talking rituals that would make your eyebrows do a little dance of confusion, maybe even a full-blown interpretive routine of horror. Imagine stepping off your comfortable couch and right into the dusty, sun-baked streets of Athens, or perhaps the rugged, unforgiving terrain of Sparta. The air is thick with the scent of olives, human sweat, and something else. Something you can't quite put your finger on, but it makes the hairs on your arms stand up. You might think you're ready for a relaxing stroll through history, but a friendly word of warning if you were actually there, you probably wouldn't last 5 minutes. Seriously. Your modern sensibilities, they'd be ripped to shreds faster than a sacrificial goat at a Dionysian festival. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're listening, drop a comment with your location and the time. It's always wild to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on uneven, sun-baked earth, the kind that kicks up dust with every step. The air, thick and humid, carries the distant bleating of sheep and the murmur of voices, a strange mix of the familiar and the utterly alien. This isn't the idyllic, sun-drenched landscape depicted in travel brochures. This is ancient Greece, raw and unvarnished, and you're about to discover that its history is less about philosophical debates under olive trees and more about a whole lot of practices that would make you seriously question your life choices if you ever stumbled upon them in person. Imagine, for a moment, that you've somehow been transported back in time, not as a casual observer with a smartphone, but as an actual inhabitant. Your first impression might be the sheer density of life. People are everywhere, bustling through narrow streets, their tunics flowing, their sandals slapping against the packed dirt. The smells are intense wood smoke, baking bread, unwashed bodies, and the pungent aroma of animal waste. This isn't just a place. It's a living, breathing, unapologetically unfiltered experience. One of the first things you notice, as you navigate this new reality, is the omnipresence of the gods. Not in some abstract, distant way, but as tangible, demanding entities woven into the very fabric of daily life. Every sunrise, every harvest, every birth, every death, it's all attributed to the whims of Olympus. And these gods, they're not exactly the benevolent, all-loving deities you might be used to from modern narratives. No, the Greek gods are capricious, jealous, and often downright petty. They demand respect, devotion, and most disturbingly, appeasement. You witness a small family, huddled together outside their modest home, offering a small, freshly baked loaf of bread and a handful of figs to a crude wooden idol of Hermes. The father whispers prayers, his eyes fixed on the statue, a mixture of hope and palpable fear in his gaze. It's a simple act, yet it underscores a profound truth about this world: nothing is taken for granted. Every blessing is earned, every misfortune a potential divine punishment. And this constant need to placate the gods leads to some of the most interesting rituals. Consider the notion of purification. You might think of a nice, long shower, maybe a face mask and some calming music. In ancient Greece, purification could involve some truly eye-watering methods. Imagine you've just touched a dead body, a common enough occurrence in a world without modern medicine. Suddenly, you're deemed ritually impure. Forget hand sanitizer. You might find yourself subjected to a rather vigorous scrubbing with lye, or perhaps doused in animal blood, which was believed to have purifying properties. The smell alone would be enough to make you question your commitment to cleanliness. And if you thought that was intense, wait until you hear about the ritual cleansing for more serious transgressions. Historians still debate whether all purification rituals were equally widespread across all city-states, or if certain regions had their own particularly unique approaches. You walk past a bustling marketplace, the agora, where merchants shout their wares and philosophers engage in lively debate. But even here, in the heart of intellectual discourse, the undercurrent of ritual is ever present. You see a man meticulously pouring a libation of wine onto the ground before opening his stall for the day, a small offering to ensure good fortune and ward off evil spirits. It's a subtle gesture, easily missed if you're not looking, but it speaks volumes about the constant vigilance required to navigate this world. Every transaction, every journey, every important decision is prefaced by an attempt to gain divine favor. Then there are the divination practices, where the future is glimpsed through rather creative, and often messy, means forget crystal balls, think animal entrails. You might stumble upon a priest, his hands covered in blood, meticulously examining the liver of a recently sacrificed animal, seeking omens in its folds and patterns. The precision with which they interpreted these gruesome signs is remarkable, and to your modern eye, utterly baffling. The belief was that the gods communicated through these visceral messages, and ignoring them was an invitation to disaster. You can almost smell the coppery tang in the air as you quickly pass by, trying not to gawk. One particularly striking example of this deep-seated belief in divine intervention comes in the form of curses. Not just casual grumbling, but meticulously crafted curse tablets, often inscribed on lead and folded, then deliberately placed in graves or wells, intended to bind and harm an enemy. Imagine the sheer intensity of the hatred or desperation required to commission such an artifact. You might see a small, unassuming shop where such services are offered, the air thick with whispered intentions and dark promises. It's a stark reminder that even everyday grievances could escalate into something far more sinister, all under the watchful, or perhaps indifferent, eyes of the gods. As you wander through the labyrinthine streets, you encounter various shrines and altars tucked into unexpected corners. Some are grand and imposing, dedicated to major deities like Zeus or Athena, adorned with offerings of flowers, fruits, and even intricate miniature statues. Others are humble, barely more than a pile of stones, honoring local nymphs or minor protective spirits. You notice people pausing at these altars, not just to offer prayers, but to leave tiny personal tokens, a lock of hair, a small piece of jewelry, a hand-carved figurine. These aren't just religious acts, they're deeply personal appeals, a desperate attempt to forge a connection with forces beyond human comprehension. Consider the concept of miasma, a sort of ritual pollution that could afflict individuals, families, or even entire communities. It wasn't just about physical dirt, it was a spiritual stain, often brought about by murder, sacrilege, or even just being near something ritually unclean. If you were afflicted with miasma, you were effectively ostracized until properly cleansed. No one would associate with you. You couldn't participate in religious ceremonies, and your very presence was seen as a threat to the community's well-being. Imagine trying to explain that to your boss today. Sorry, I can't come to work. I've got miasma. You'd be laughed out of the office. But in ancient Greece, it was a very real, very terrifying threat. This wasn't some minor inconvenience. It was a societal death sentence, until the correct rituals were performed to purify you. Even something as seemingly innocuous as a banquet could be steeped in ritual. You might be invited to a symposium, an all-male drinking party, where philosophical discussion mingles with copious amounts of wine. But before the merriment truly begins, a portion of the wine is poured out as a libation to the gods, and hymns are sung, even in their leisure. The Greeks were acutely aware of the divine presence, and sometimes the line between revelry and ritual blurs, especially during festivals dedicated to Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. You might witness scenes of wild abandon, where inhibitions are shed and participants reach a state of frenzy, believing they are communing directly with the god. It's a vivid, chaotic spectacle that would be both fascinating and deeply unsettling to behold. The role of dreams also played a significant part in their spiritual lives. It wasn't just random neurological firings. Dreams were often seen as direct messages from the gods, or visitations from the deceased. You might hear stories of people traveling to specific temples, like the Asklepieion, a healing temple dedicated to Asklepios, the god of medicine, to undergo a process called incubation. Here, you would sleep within the sacred precinct, hoping that the god would appear to you in a dream and offer a cure or guidance. Imagine falling asleep on a stone slab, surrounded by other hopeful supplicants, all waiting for a divine apparition. The desperation, the fervent belief, it's almost tangible in the ancient air. This particular ritual highlights the intertwining of health, religion, and the supernatural in their daily lives. One common, yet utterly alien aspect of daily life revolved around the concept of hospitality, or xenia. While not a disturbing ritual in the conventional sense, its rigid rules and severe consequences for breaking them highlight a deeply ingrained belief system that governed social interaction. If a stranger arrived at your door, you were ritually obligated to offer them food, shelter, and protection, even if they were an enemy. To violate xenia was an offense against Zeus himself, and the punishment could be swift and devastating, often involving divine retribution or social ruin. It meant that every stranger was a potential messenger of the gods, and every interaction carried a spiritual weight. As you spend more time in this ancient world, you begin to appreciate the layers of ritual that govern every aspect of existence. From the moment you wake, offering a morning prayer to Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, to the simple act of preparing a meal, with a small portion dedicated to the household gods. Life is a constant series of acknowledgments and appeasements. It's a world where the sacred and the mundane are inextricably linked, where every action carries a potential divine consequence. And it's this constant negotiation with the unseen forces of the cosmos that makes ancient Greece so compelling, and at times, so profoundly unsettling. You realize that their understanding of the world, their fears, and their hopes were all channeled through these elaborate, often perplexing, rituals. The sheer depth of their devotion, even to the more bizarre aspects, is what truly separates their reality from yours. You've managed to navigate the perplexing daily rituals of ancient Greek life. But now, your journey takes a sharp turn. From the bustling agora to the stark, windswept plains of Laconia, the homeland of Sparta, forget everything you thought you knew about childhood. Here, it's not about playdates and bedtime stories. It's about endurance, discipline, and a brutal education designed to forge an unyielding warrior, or break you entirely. Imagine you are a newborn in Sparta. There's no cooing over your tiny fingers and toes. Instead, you are immediately presented to a council of elders, the Gerousia, who perform a swift and utterly unsentimental inspection. They are looking for physical perfection, for any sign of weakness or deformity. This isn't just a grim formality. It's a matter of life and death. If you are deemed too frail, too imperfect, or simply not robust enough to become a future soldier, your fate is sealed. You are taken to a chasm, often the apotheke at the foot of Mount Taygetus, and left to die. No tears, no eulogies, just a chilling pragmatism aimed at ensuring the strength of the Spartan state. This eugenic infanticide, as it would be labeled today, was a foundational ritual, a chilling opening act to the Spartan saga that, to your modern mind, is nothing short of horrifying. If you pass this initial, terrifying inspection, your early years are spent within the family unit. But even here, the Spartan ethos permeates. You are bathed in wine, not water, believed to toughen your skin and build resistance. You are encouraged to be independent, to resist crying, and to endure discomfort without complaint. This early conditioning is relentless, a constant, subtle pressure to conform to the ideal of the stoic, unyielding Spartan. Then, at the tender age of 7, your childhood ends abruptly. You are taken from your family. from the comfort, however limited, of your home, and plunged into the agoge, the Spartan state-sponsored education system. This is where the true, disturbing rituals begin. Rituals designed to strip away individuality and mold you into a perfectly obedient, ruthlessly efficient cog in the Spartan war machine. You are no longer you in the sense of a unique person. You are now a unit, an apprentice warrior. Your first experience in the agoge is likely one of shock. You are grouped with other boys your age, all similarly uprooted and disoriented. Your head is shaved. You are given a single, thin cloak to wear year-round, regardless of the weather, and you are expected to sleep on a hard bed of reeds, which you gather yourself. Food is scarce and deliberately meager. You are always hungry, always cold, always tired. This isn't just about making you tough. It's about teaching you to endure deprivation, to suppress your physical needs, and to prioritize the group over yourself. You are constantly watched, constantly tested. Older boys, known as irons, are put in charge of your group, and their authority is absolute. They are encouraged to beat you if you disobey, if you show weakness, or even if they just feel like it. This wasn't considered abuse. It was part of the process, designed to teach obedience and to foster a ruthless pecking order. Imagine living in a constant state of low-level fear, knowing that any perceived misstep could result in a painful beating. It's a system that thrives on intimidation and absolute submission. One of the most infamous rituals you would endure is the cryptia. This was a secret, brutal rite of passage for the most promising young Spartans, typically around the age of 18 or 19. You are sent out into the countryside, armed with only a dagger and minimal rations. Your mission to survive by your wits and to kill any helots, the enslaved population of Sparta you encounter who are deemed too robust or potentially rebellious. The cryptia wasn't just about physical survival. It was a psychological test, a deliberate act of dehumanization designed to solidify your role as a ruthless enforcer of Spartan dominance. It taught you to kill without hesitation, to operate in stealth, and to view the helots not as people, but as a perpetual threat to be managed with extreme prejudice. Imagine being told to hunt down and kill a defenseless person, under the cover of darkness, purely as a test of your loyalty and ruthlessness. It's a chilling reminder of the dark underbelly of Spartan society. Historians still debate the precise frequency and scale of the cryptia, with some arguing it was a more formalized, widespread practice, while others suggest it was an occasional tool used to suppress helot uprisings. Regardless, its existence speaks volumes about the Spartan mindset. Beyond these extreme rituals, your daily life in the agoge is a constant grind of physical training, military drills, and lessons in obedience. You learn to march in formation, to wield a spear and shield, and to fight as a cohesive unit. But intellectual pursuits are minimal. You are taught only what is deemed necessary for a soldier basic literacy, some poetry, especially martial hymns, and an emphasis on laconic, concise speech. This isn't about fostering independent thought. It's about creating a uniform, efficient fighting force. You are encouraged, even expected, to steal food if you are hungry. But here's the catch: if you are caught, you are severely punished, not for the act of stealing, but for your incompetence in getting caught. This paradox is designed to teach cunning, stealth, and resourcefulness, qualities highly valued in a warrior. Imagine the constant gnawing hunger, the desperate attempts to sneak a morsel, and the agonizing fear of discovery. It's a harsh lesson in survival, where failure is met with pain. This particular practice highlights their unique take on discipline and initiative. Another striking aspect of your life in the agoge is the deliberate public shaming used as a tool of control. If you performed poorly in drills, showed cowardice, or failed to adhere to the strict codes of conduct, you wouldn't just be punished privately. You might be forced to stand naked in front of your peers, or subjected to public whippings. The aim was to instill a deep sense of shame and to reinforce the importance of honor and conformity to the Spartan ideal. It's a psychological tactic designed to break down individual pride and replace it with an unwavering loyalty to the collective. Your diet, as mentioned, is notoriously Spartan, pun intended. You would subsist on a coarse black broth, known as melas zomos, or black broth, made from pork, blood, salt, and vinegar. It was said to be so unpalatable that a king from Pontus, after tasting it, remarked that he now understood why Spartans were so fearless in battle. They preferred death to another bowl of the stuff. Imagine having this as your staple meal, day in and day out. Its bitter, metallic taste a constant reminder of the hardships you were expected to endure. It was a ritualistic deprivation, a way of hardening you to discomfort and ensuring you wouldn't fight for luxury, but for survival and the glory of Sparta. Even your sexual relationships are highly regulated and, to a modern eye, rather unusual. Older men, including your commanders, might form mentorships with younger boys, and these relationships could sometimes have a pederastic component. However, the emphasis was on discipline and the transfer of knowledge, not purely sexual gratification. These relationships were viewed as part of the agoge, a way for experienced warriors to guide and instill virtues in the next generation. The societal acceptance of such practices in ancient Sparta is a complex subject, often debated by scholars, but it was certainly a ritualized aspect of their social fabric that would raise eyebrows today. As you near the end of your time in the agoge, typically around the age of 20, you would undergo a final series of evaluations and tests. Only upon successful completion would you become a full citizen and a soldier, known as a homoios, or equal. But even then, your life remains rigidly controlled. You live in communal messes, eating with your fellow soldiers, and your private life is almost non-existent. You are expected to marry, but your interactions with your wife are limited, often under the cover of darkness, to ensure maximum focus on military duties. This system was designed to prevent any personal attachments from interfering with your unwavering loyalty to the state. You remember the strange notion of having a family, but living essentially separate lives, dedicated entirely to the state. The entire life cycle in Sparta, from birth to adulthood, is a continuous, relentless ritual of conditioning, deprivation, and social engineering. Every aspect is designed to strip away personal desires and foster an absolute devotion to the collective, to the strength of the army. It's a society built on the bedrock of fear, fear of weakness, fear of defeat, and fear of Helot rebellion. And the disturbing rituals you endure throughout your youth are the tools used to forge this formidable, if brutal, social order. You come to understand that, for the Spartans, the individual existed solely for the state, and every discomfort, every sacrifice, was a necessary step towards maintaining their unique and terrifying dominance. Having survived, metaphorically speaking, the brutal Spartan agoge, you now find yourself in a very different arena, the world of the ancient Olympic Games. You might picture chariots thundering around a track, muscular athletes gleaming with olive oil, and crowds cheering wildly. And while those images aren't entirely wrong, they barely scratch the surface of the deeply disturbing rituals that underpin these seemingly glorious celebrations of athleticism. This wasn't just a sports festival, it was a profound religious event, a complex tapestry woven with sacrifice, divination, and an almost fanatical pursuit of purity and divine favor. Your arrival in Olympia, the sacred site of the Games, immediately impresses upon you the sheer scale of the event. Tens of thousands of people have converged here from across the Greek world: athletes, trainers, spectators, merchants, priests, and pilgrims. The air is thick with anticipation, but also with the smell of wood smoke, animal dung, and something heavier, the scent of raw belief. You notice the pervasive dust, kicked up by countless feet, mingling with the heat of the summer sun. Before any athlete even sets foot on the track or in the wrestling pit, the entire event is steeped in religious ritual. The games are, first and foremost, a dedication to Zeus, the king of the gods, and Zeus, like all Greek deities, demands proper respect and appropriate offerings. You observe priests moving through the crowds, their faces solemn, Preparing for the opening ceremonies. This isn't just a perfunctory prayer. It's a detailed, multi-day process of appeasement. One of the most prominent, and to your modern sensibilities, most unsettling rituals, is the mass animal sacrifice. You witness the procession. Hundreds of oxen, garlanded for the occasion, are led to the great altar of Zeus, a colossal mound built up over centuries from the ashes of previous sacrifices. The sheer number of animals being led to slaughter is staggering. Priests, known as mantes, meticulously prepare the animals, checking for any blemishes that might displease the gods. Then, with swift, practiced movements, their throats are cut. The air fills with the guttural sounds of dying animals, the metallic tang of blood, and the rising smoke from the burning entrails. The best parts of the sacrificed animals, the thigh bones, wrapped in fat, are offered to Zeus, consumed by fire on the altar, their smoke ascending to the heavens. The rest of the meat is distributed to the participants and spectators. It's a gruesome, visceral spectacle, yet it's performed with utmost reverence, a profound act of piety. You feel the heat from the burning pyre, and the smell of roasting meat and ash clogs your nostrils. This is no picnic. It's a powerful, bloody communion with the divine. Before any competition begins, every athlete is required to swear an oath before the statue of Zeus Horkios, the oath-taking Zeus. You watch as athletes, their bodies glistening with oil, raise their hands and solemnly promise to compete fairly, to obey the rules, and not to cheat. But the oath isn't just a sporting formality. It's a deeply religious vow. The consequences of breaking it are believed to be dire. Not just shame and disqualification, but divine wrath. Imagine the psychological weight of such a promise, knowing that Zeus himself is watching, ready to strike down anyone who dares to transgress. The statue itself is imposing, almost menacing, and you can sense the fear and respect it inspires in the athletes. You also notice the presence of the Hellenodikai, the judges of the games. These aren't just referees, they are religious officials, chosen for their integrity and knowledge of the sacred traditions. They wear purple robes, symbolizing their authority, and carry whips. Their role is to ensure fair play, but also to uphold the sanctity of the games, punishing any athlete who violates the rules or offends the gods through cheating. You see them watching with hawk-like intensity, their expressions unyielding. Cheating, when discovered, is met with severe and public humiliation. If an athlete is caught bribing an opponent, deliberately fouling, or engaging in any other form of deceit, they are not only disqualified, but also fined heavily. The money from these fines is then used to erect Zane's statues, bronze figures of Zeus, lining the path to the stadium. Each statue has the name of the disgraced athlete inscribed on its base, serving as a permanent, public monument to their shame. Imagine being that athlete, your name etched in bronze, forever a symbol of your transgression. It's a chilling reminder that the pursuit of glory in ancient Greece was always balanced by the ever-present threat of public disgrace and divine condemnation. You can almost hear the murmurs of the crowd as they pass these statues, a collective condemnation echoing through time. Beyond the formal rituals, there are countless smaller personal acts of devotion. You see athletes pouring libations of wine before their events, offering small clay figurines or garlands of flowers at minor altars dedicated to various gods associated with athletic prowess, like Hermes or Heracles. Some wear amulets for good luck, or carry small charms believed to protect them from injury. The athletes are not just relying on their physical strength and training, they are constantly seeking divine assistance. Knowing that a single misstep, a moment of bad fortune, could be interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure. One particularly intriguing, and somewhat disturbing, ritual involves the training regimens of the athletes themselves. It wasn't just about lifting weights and running laps. Many athletes adhered to strict diets, often involving large quantities of meat, and followed specific purification rites before important competitions. they might avoid certain foods, engage in ritual bathing, or even abstain from sexual activity for extended periods, believing these practices would enhance their performance and gain divine favor. The dedication was absolute, bordering on asceticism. You might even see them engaging in manual labor as part of their training, believing it built a more rugged and resilient body, embodying a holistic approach to physical and mental hardening that's quite different from modern sports science. Another fascinating, yet often overlooked, aspect is the role of oracles and omens in determining the success of athletes. Before important events, athletes and their trainers might consult local seers or even travel to major oracular sites like Delphi, which we'll explore further in the next chapter to seek divine guidance. The interpretation of bird flights, the patterns of smoke from sacrifices, or even peculiar dreams could influence training strategies or even an athlete's decision to compete. The belief was that success wasn't solely dependent on skill and effort, but also on the will of the gods, which could be discerned through these various forms of divination. You remember the earlier mention of divination and how pervasive it was. The very concept of nudity in the Olympic Games also presents a cultural distinction that might feel uncomfortable to your modern sensibilities. Athletes competed completely naked, a practice believed to honor the gods and symbolize purity and the ideal human form. While this was a common cultural norm in ancient Greece for athletic events, for someone transported from a different era, it would certainly be a striking and perhaps disorienting sight. The emphasis was on the beauty and strength of the unadorned human body, a stark contrast to the often modest attire of everyday life. This deliberate lack of clothing was itself a form of ritual display, a sign of their dedication and their adherence to tradition. Even the victors' celebrations held disturbing undertones. While athletes were crowned with olive wreaths and returned home as heroes, their glory was seen as a gift from the gods, not solely a result of their own efforts. They would dedicate their wreaths to various deities, offer further sacrifices, and often commission statues of themselves, not just to commemorate their victory, but to thank the gods for their divine favor, and for those who failed. The shame was not just personal, it was also interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure. You can almost feel the intense pressure on the athletes, knowing that their performance wasn't just for themselves or their city-state, but for the approval of powerful, unpredictable gods. The truce of Ekacheria, or the Olympic truce, itself was a ritual. For the duration of the Games, all warfare ceased, allowing athletes and spectators safe passage to Olympia. This wasn't merely a practical arrangement, it was a sacred injunction, a period of ritual peace enforced by divine decree. Violating the truce was considered a grave act of sacrilege, incurring the wrath of Zeus and other gods. Imagine a world where the power of a religious festival could halt the bloodshed of war, even temporarily. It highlights the immense spiritual authority wielded by the Olympic Games, far beyond mere athletic competition. You recognize that for the ancient Greeks, the Olympic Games were more than just a contest of physical prowess. They were a profound expression of their religious beliefs, a complex series of rituals designed to honor the gods, purify the participants, and seek divine favor. The disturbing aspects, the mass animal sacrifices, the harsh punishments for cheating, the public shaming, all serve to reinforce the sanctity of the event and the absolute power of the gods. You walk away from Olympia with a newfound understanding of just how deeply intertwined sport and spirituality were in this ancient world. A world where every jump, every throw, and every race was, in essence, an offering to the heavens. After witnessing the blood-soaked piety of the Olympic Games, your journey through ancient Greece continues, leading you to a place of profound mystery and unsettling pronouncements. Delphi, home of the most famous oracle in the ancient world. You've heard whispers of its power, of rulers and commoners alike making the arduous pilgrimage to seek answers from the gods. But as you approach this sacred site, nestled high on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, you sense that this isn't merely a place of wisdom, it's a nexus of belief, desperation, and a form of divine communication that often veils more than it reveals. The air here is different, cooler, perhaps, but also charged with an almost palpable spiritual energy. You see the gleaming white marble of the temples, nestled amidst rugged, dramatic cliffs, pilgrims, their faces etched with anxiety and hope, throng the sacred way, clutching offerings. The entire atmosphere suggests a serious, almost somber occasion. This is no bustling marketplace. It's a sanctuary, a gateway to the divine. Your purpose, like that of countless others, is to consult the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, who delivers the oracle's prophecies. But getting to her isn't as simple as queuing up. The process itself is a series of rituals designed to ensure purity, appease the gods, and perhaps to heighten the psychological impact of the oracle's pronouncements. First, you must purify yourself. This involves ritual bathing in the waters of the Castalian Spring, a sacred source flowing from the rocks. The water is cold, invigorating, but also carries the weight of centuries of spiritual cleansing. You observe other pilgrims ritually washing themselves, their movements deliberate and solemn. After purification, you must present an offering to Apollo. This can range from a simple cake to a precious artifact, or even an animal sacrifice. You see a wealthy merchant leading a goat, destined for the altar. The more significant your offering, the more likely you are to be granted an audience, and perhaps a more favorable prophecy. The animal sacrifice here at Delphi, while perhaps less grand in scale than the Olympic Games, is no less vital. A goat is typically sacrificed, but not just any goat. Before the sacrifice, cold water is sprinkled on the animal. If it shudders, it's deemed an auspicious sign, indicating that Apollo is ready to receive questions. If it doesn't shudder, the sacrifice might be aborted, and the process would have to begin again with a new animal. Imagine the tension, the silent prayers, as the water is splashed, waiting for that crucial tremor. This is a subtle yet profound ritual of divination, a direct dialogue with the divine will. Once the sacrifices and offerings are complete, you proceed to the temple of Apollo. But you won't enter the inner sanctuary directly. The Pythia resides in the Adyton, a secluded chamber deep within the temple, accessible only to her and the attending priests, known as the Hosiotes and Prophetai. You are given a specific slot, determined by lot, or perhaps by the size of your offering, creating an anxious wait. The Pythia herself is a figure shrouded in mystery and ritual. She is typically an older woman, chosen from the local Delphi community, who has lived a chaste and virtuous life. Before delivering prophecies, she would undergo a ritualistic preparation, which often included bathing in the Castalian Spring, burning laurel leaves, Apollo's sacred plant, and possibly inhaling fumes from a chasm or burning substances. The exact nature of the vapors or substances believed to induce her trance-like state is one of the most enduring academic debates among historians and archaeologists. Some propose geological explanations, like ethylene gas escaping from fissures, while others argue for the psychological effects of ritual, fasting, and the intense atmosphere. Regardless of the scientific explanation, the belief at the time was that she was literally possessed by Apollo. When it's your turn, you don't speak directly to the Pythia. Instead, you present your question, often written on a tablet, to the propheties, the male priests who mediate the process. Your question must be simple, concise, and typically a yes or no type, or seeking guidance on a specific course of action, like should I declare war, or will my journey be prosperous? Then, the moment arrives. The Pythia, seated on a tripod over a fissure in the rock, begins to speak. Her words are not clear, articulate sentences. Instead, they are often a jumble of sounds, cries, and enigmatic phrases, delivered in a frenzied state. Her voice might be deep and guttural. Unlike her normal tone, it's unsettling, almost frightening, to witness someone seemingly overwhelmed by a divine presence. The priests then interpret her utterances, rendering them into a poetic, often ambiguous verse. And this ambiguity is where the disturbing element truly lies. The prophecies are rarely straightforward. Instead, they are riddles, metaphors, or double-edged statements that require careful, often anxious, interpretation. For example, the famous prophecy to King Croesus of Lydia: "If you attack Persia, you will destroy a great empire," led him to believe he would conquer the Persians. Instead, he destroyed his own empire. This ambiguity isn't a bug, it's a feature. It preserves the oracle's infallibility, as any outcome can be retrospectively fitted to the prophecy. But, for the supplicant, it creates immense anxiety and responsibility. You are given an answer, but the burden of understanding its true meaning, and thus your fate, rests entirely on you. Imagine receiving such a prophecy. You've spent days, weeks, perhaps months traveling, enduring rituals, making sacrifices, all for a sliver of divine guidance. And what you get is a cryptic verse that could mean anything. The tension, the sleepless nights spent agonizing over its meaning, the fear of misinterpreting Apollo's will. These are the psychological burdens of consulting the Delphic oracle. It's a profound act of surrendering control to an unseen force, trusting that the universe will reveal its secrets, even if those secrets are spoken in tongues. Beyond the specific prophecies, the very act of seeking an oracle highlights a pervasive fatalism in ancient Greek thought. While they believed in individual agency, there was also a strong sense that certain events were predetermined, woven into the fabric of destiny by the gods. Consulting the oracle wasn't about changing fate, but about understanding it, and perhaps navigating it with divine blessing. This belief in a preordained path, often revealed through disturbing oracles, could be a heavy psychological burden. You remember how the Greek gods were capricious, and now you see their pronouncements equally so. You also observe the many votive offerings left around the sanctuary by grateful, or perhaps desperate, visitors. These range from small clay tablets inscribed with prayers to magnificent bronze statues, some even larger than life. These aren't just thank you notes, they are tangible testaments to the power of the oracle and the widespread belief in its divine connection. Each offering tells a silent story of a prayer answered, a dilemma resolved, or a catastrophe averted. Or perhaps, simply, the sheer hope of it all. The political influence of the Delphic oracle was immense. City-states would send official delegations, known as theoroi, to consult Apollo on matters of war, colonization, and lawmaking. No major undertaking was launched without first seeking the oracle's approval. This meant that the priests of Delphi, the interpreters of the Pythia's words, held enormous, albeit indirect, power. They were not just religious figures, they were political arbiters, their pronouncements capable of shifting alliances, launching wars, or averting disaster. The decisions of entire nations rested on the interpretation of those unsettling, ambiguous verses. There were also cases where the oracle's pronouncements were believed to have been manipulated for political gain. While the Pythia herself was likely sincere in her trance, the priests who interpreted her words had the power to shape the message. Imagine the potential for corruption, for a priest to subtly twist a prophecy to favor one city-state over another, or to serve a personal agenda. This possibility adds another layer of unease to the oracle's authority, blurring the line between divine will and human machination. As you leave Delphi, the echoes of the Pythia's fragmented words seem to linger in the air. You've witnessed a profound act of faith, a desperate yearning for guidance in a world governed by unpredictable gods. But you've also seen the unsettling ambiguity of divine communication, the burden it places on the seeker, and the potential for manipulation in the pursuit of power. The oracle wasn't just a source of answers. It was a disturbing mirror reflecting humanity's anxieties, its desires for control, and its unwavering belief in the unseen forces that shaped its destiny. The chilling realization is that sometimes, knowing the future, or thinking you know it, can be far more unsettling than facing the unknown. Having navigated the ambiguous prophecies of Delphi, your journey now takes an even deeper dive into the spiritual heart of ancient Greece, to the most sacred and secretive rites known, the mysteries of Eleusis. You've heard whispers about these rites, how they promised enlightenment, a deeper understanding of life and death, and a blissful afterlife. But the very secrecy surrounding them, the absolute prohibition against revealing their content, hints at something profound, perhaps even disturbing, that sets them apart from the more public rituals you've witnessed. You find yourself among a throng of people making the pilgrimage from Athens to Eleusis, a town about 14 miles to the west. This isn't a casual stroll. It's a journey filled with anticipation and a profound sense of purpose. You are all mistai, initiates, seeking to participate in the sacred rites dedicated to Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her daughter, Persephone, queen of the underworld. The journey itself is part of the ritual, a symbolic movement from the mundane world to the sacred. The mysteries are not open to just anyone. You must be a free Greek speaker, excluding those who had committed murder, though even some murderers could be purified. This exclusivity immediately creates a sense of privilege and urgency. You feel the collective excitement and solemnity of the crowd, knowing you are about to embark on something truly transformative. The preparations begin days before the actual greater mysteries in the autumn. You first participate in the lesser mysteries in the spring, a preliminary purification held in Athens, involving ritual bathing in the sea at Phaleron and animal sacrifices. This initial cleansing is crucial, a ritualistic shedding of impurities to prepare your body and soul for the deeper revelations to come. Imagine standing in the cold sea, letting the waves wash over you, believing that every drop is purifying you for an encounter with the divine. The main procession to Eleusis is a spectacle in itself. You walk along the sacred way, chanting hymns, carrying torches, and accompanied by priests and priestesses. The journey culminates in a night vigil and further purification at the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation at Eleusis. This enormous, dimly lit hall is where the most profound secrets will be revealed. The atmosphere inside is thick with incense, the flickering light of torches casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. What happens inside the Telesterion is the most guarded secret of all. For over 2 millennia, no initiate ever publicly revealed the exact nature of the rituals, under penalty of death. This absolute secrecy is what makes the Eleusinian mysteries so disturbing in their allure. What could be so potent, so transformative, that its revelation would be considered a sacrilege punishable by death? This veil of silence, more than any specific act, creates an enduring sense of unease and intense curiosity. Historians still debate the precise content of the Eleusinian mysteries, relying on fragmented archaeological evidence and cryptic allusions in ancient texts. From what little is known, and from the allusions in ancient texts, the mysteries seem to involve a dramatic reenactment of the myth of Demeter and Persephone. You would witness, or perhaps even participate in, symbolic actions related to Persephone's abduction by Hades, Demeter's desperate search, and her eventual reunion with her daughter, which brings life and fertility back to the earth. This reenactment wasn't merely a play, it was believed to be a profound, mystical experience that allowed initiates to directly connect with the divine cycle of life, death, and rebirth. You might experience moments of intense darkness, symbolizing Demeter's grief and the barrenness of the earth. Then, gradually, light would appear, perhaps from a hidden source, or from a sudden opening. This progression from darkness to light was central to the spiritual journey, symbolizing the transition from ignorance to enlightenment. Imagine being in that vast, dark hall, the air thick with anticipation, and then experiencing a sudden, dramatic illumination. The psychological impact would be immense, designed to evoke awe and a sense of divine presence. One of the most intriguing and potentially disturbing aspects hinted at is the ingestion of a sacred drink, the kykeon. This beverage was made from barley and mint, and some scholars speculate it might have been laced with psychoactive substances, such as ergot fungus, a natural source of LSD-like compounds. If this were true, the visions and profound spiritual experiences reported by initiates could be chemically induced, blurring the line between mystical revelation and altered states of consciousness. Imagine drinking this concoction in the dimly lit telesterion, and then witnessing the unfolding drama of the myth. Your perceptions heightened and distorted. It adds a whole new, unsettling dimension to the enlightenment offered by the mysteries. The climax of the mysteries is believed to have involved the revelation of Hira. Sacred things. What these were remains unknown. It could have been sacred objects displayed to the initiates, or perhaps an agricultural symbol, like an ear of corn, representing the cycle of life. The profound simplicity of such a revelation, after so much preparation and secrecy, might seem anticlimactic to a modern mind. But for the ancients, it held immense power, connecting them directly to the life-giving forces of the earth and the promise of renewal. The sheer weight of the anticipation, leading to this ultimate, whispered revelation, would have been almost unbearable. The promise of the Eleusinian mysteries was a blissful afterlife. Unlike other Greek beliefs where the afterlife was a shadowy, often bleak existence in Hades, initiates of Eleusis were promised a more favorable fate, a form of spiritual comfort and hope in the face of death. This hope, this promise of solace beyond the grave, was a powerful motivator for participation. The disturbing aspect lies in the exclusivity of this promise. Only those who participated in these secret rites were privy to this special destiny. It created a clear division between the initiated and the uninitiated, reinforcing the sense of being part of a chosen few. You recall the general Greek understanding of the underworld as a gloomy place, making the Eleusinian promise seem even more extraordinary. The profound psychological impact of the mysteries is undeniable. The combination of fasting, purification, procession, sensory deprivation, darkness, silence, sudden illumination, and potentially psychoactive substances, all within a highly charged religious atmosphere, was designed to create an overwhelming experience. Initiates emerged transformed, not just believing in the gods, but feeling that they had directly experienced the divine. This altered state of consciousness, leading to a feeling of transcendence, could be both exhilarating and disorienting. For centuries, the Eleusinian mysteries remained a central pillar of Greek religious life, drawing initiates from all walks of life, including prominent figures like Plato, Cicero, and Augustus. The very persistence of the cult, despite its extreme secrecy, speaks to its power and its profound influence on the ancient mind. The disturbing aspect isn't just the secrecy, but the implicit suggestion that true spiritual understanding could only be achieved through these veiled, often intense, and physically demanding rituals. It underscores a fundamental difference in how they sought truth, not through open discourse, but through an exclusive, ritualized experience. As you step out of the telesterion, the morning sun feels different. The world seems sharper, more vibrant, yet also imbued with a deeper layer of meaning. You carry with you not just memories, but a profound shift in perspective, a sense of having touched something truly ancient and powerful. The unsettling nature of the secrecy, the hints of mind-altering substances, and the exclusive promise of an enlightened afterlife all combine to leave you with a lingering sense of awe and a quiet understanding of the powerful, sometimes frightening. Hold that these ancient rituals had over the minds and souls of those who participated. You feel as though you've glimpsed a truth that is both comforting and unsettling, a secret that binds you forever to those who shared the experience. Having plumbed the depths of the Eleusinian mysteries, you now find yourself amidst a much more social, yet equally ritualized setting, the ancient Greek symposium. You might envision lively philosophical debates, elegant verses recited, and wine flowing freely. And while these elements are certainly present, Beneath the veneer of intellectual discourse and convivial revelry lie some decidedly disturbing undercurrents. Rituals of social interaction that reveal much about power dynamics, social norms, and even less savory behaviors. Imagine you've received an invitation to a symposium, typically held in the andron, the men's dining room of a private house. As you arrive, the atmosphere is already thick with the scent of olive oil, roasted meats, and the sweet, heavy aroma of wine. This isn't just a dinner party. It's a highly structured event with specific rituals and expectations. You are given a place on a reclining couch, or klein, arranged around the room, often sharing it with another guest. This immediate intimacy, lounging side by side, sets a particular tone. The first ritual involves purification. Before the serious drinking and conversation begin, servants offer basins of water for guests to wash their hands, a practical act that also carries ritual significance, cleansing you before the communal consumption. Then, food is served, typically a light meal. As the main focus of the symposium isn't the eating, but the drinking and conversation, you savor the simple yet flavorful dishes: olives, cheese, bread, perhaps some roasted meat. After the meal, the serious part of the symposium begins with a libation. A portion of wine is poured out onto the floor as an offering to the gods, usually Zeus and the Agathos diamond good spirit, and hymns are sung. This act elevates the gathering beyond mere social recreation. It becomes a sacred space, consecrated to the gods. Imagine the clinking of cups, the shared solemnity, before the conversation explodes into lively debate. It's a deliberate pause, a moment of shared reverence before the descent into spirited revelry. The drinking itself is highly ritualized. Unlike modern parties where everyone drinks at their own pace, at a symposium, the crater, a large mixing bowl, dictates the flow of wine. Wine was almost always diluted with water, as drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric. A symposiarch, or master of ceremonies, chosen by lot or by agreement, sets the ratio of wine to water and determines the number of rounds. This control ensures that everyone drinks at roughly the same pace, leading to a communal journey towards intoxication. It also highlights a disturbing aspect: the deliberate pursuit of altered states of consciousness through ritualized consumption. Not for religious vision, but for social bonding and uninhibited conversation. The chosen ratios could be revealing a 3-to-1 water-to-wine ratio for gentle conversation, but perhaps a 2-to-1 for a wilder, more raucous gathering. The very act of mixing and the shared consumption is a powerful social binder, but also a subtle means of control. The symposiarch could encourage deeper intoxication, leading to more reckless behavior. As the evening progresses, the atmosphere loosens, and the darker undercurrents begin to emerge. While philosophy, poetry, and politics are often discussed, so too are gossip, crude jokes, and less intellectual pursuits. The symposium was a place where social hierarchies could be momentarily blurred by wine, but also where they could be powerfully reinforced. One particularly disturbing aspect, from a modern perspective, is the social acceptance of pederasty within the symposium setting. It was common for older men erastes to form relationships with younger, aristocratic boys eromenoi. While these relationships were often framed as educational or mentorships, involving the transfer of knowledge and virtue, they frequently had a sexual component. At a symposium, these dynamics could play out openly, with younger boys serving wine or reclining alongside their older admirers. Imagine being a young man navigating this environment, where your social standing and future prospects might depend on cultivating such a relationship. It's a complex, ethically challenging aspect of ancient Greek society, highlighting a power imbalance that is deeply unsettling. You recall the hints of pederasty in the Spartan agoge, and now see it manifest in a different, more social context. The entertainment at a symposium could also take on disturbing forms. Beyond the lyre playing and singing, you might witness Hetairi, educated female companions who were not wives but often skilled musicians, dancers, and conversationalists. While some were highly respected, many were essentially sex workers, and their presence underscores the unequal gender dynamics of the time. Their role was to entertain and stimulate, and their treatment could range from respectful engagement to blatant objectification. This ritualized inclusion of women primarily as entertainers, rather than equal participants, highlights the restrictive societal roles imposed upon them. Furthermore, the symposium could devolve into competitive displays of rhetoric and wit, sometimes leading to vicious personal attacks. Guests might engage in scholia, drinking songs with challenging riddles or personal insults. What begins as playful banter can quickly escalate into aggressive verbal sparring, fueled by alcohol, public shaming, subtle or overt. Could be a dark ritual of these gatherings, used to assert dominance or put a rival in their place. Imagine the tension in the air as one guest delivers a cutting remark, waiting for the response, knowing that a misstep could lead to social humiliation. The exclusion of respectable women from these gatherings is also a significant, if less overtly disturbing, ritual. Wives and daughters of the aristocratic household were strictly confined to their own quarters, rarely seen by male guests. Their absence from the public, intellectual, and social life of men speaks volumes about the patriarchal structure of ancient Greek society. The symposium, therefore, was a male-dominated space where male bonding, competition, and sometimes male excess reigned supreme. This strict segregation was a pervasive social ritual, reinforcing gender roles. You're beginning to notice a pattern of women being largely excluded from public life. The practice of throwing the kotabos was a popular symposium game, and it too has a mildly disturbing edge. Players would flick the dregs of their wine from their cups at a target, often a statue or a specific mark. While seemingly innocent, it could involve a degree of competitive aggression, and failing to hit the target might invite mockery or a penalty. Imagine wine splattering across the room, the messy aftermath, all in the name of a drunken game. It highlights the less refined, more chaotic side of these gatherings. As the night deepens, the line between intellectual discourse and drunken revelry often blurs. What might start as a sober discussion of Plato's philosophy could end in a raucous singing contest, or even a drunken brawl. The ritualized consumption of wine, designed to foster camaraderie, could just as easily unleash inhibitions and latent aggression. The disturbing aspect here is the deliberate shedding of societal constraints through alcohol, a ritualized descent into less refined behavior, justified by the setting and the purpose of the gathering. Finally, the symposium often concluded with a komos, a drunken procession through the streets. Guests, often garlanded and singing loudly, would wander through the city, sometimes serenading passers-by, sometimes causing minor mischief. This public display of intoxication, while celebrated as a sign of conviviality, could also be seen as disruptive and disorderly. It was the final, ritualized act of shedding the day's inhibitions, a drunken dance through the city that could blur the lines between celebration and public nuisance. Historians still debate the extent to which the komos was truly spontaneous versus a more ritualized, expected conclusion to the symposium, with some arguing it was a deliberate performance of Dionysian revelry. As you reflect on the symposium, you realize it was a microcosm of ancient Greek society itself, a blend of high culture and low behavior, intellectual brilliance and base instincts. The rituals, from the formal libations to the structured drinking, served to create a space where social norms could be both upheld and transgressed. The disturbing elements, the power dynamics of pederasty, the objectification of women, the competitive aggression, and the deliberate pursuit of intoxication, all reveal a complex society that was both refined and raw, and where even the most elegant gatherings could descend into unsettling displays of human nature. From the intellectual, yet often unsettling, atmosphere of the symposium, your journey now takes you to the very heart of ancient Greek piety, the ritual of animal sacrifice. You might imagine this as a dusty, distant historical footnote. But in ancient Greece, it was a central, pervasive, and intensely visceral act, a constant reminder of humanity's relationship with the gods. It was a disturbing ritual not just for the animal involved, but for the profound psychological and social implications it held for the participants. Imagine you are attending a public festival, perhaps the Panathenaea in Athens, or a local civic celebration. The air is thick with the scent of burning wood, incense, and something else, a metallic, coppery tang that hints at the blood about to be shed. You see a procession forming priests in ceremonial robes, musicians playing flutes, and most prominently, animals being led towards an altar. The sheer number of animals, typically sheep, goats, or oxen, is striking, and they're quiet, sometimes confused. Movements add a layer of unsettling anticipation. The purpose of the sacrifice is multifaceted: to honor the gods, to give thanks, to seek favor, or to atone for transgressions. It is a fundamental act of communication, a tangible offering to the divine. But it's not simply about killing an animal. It's a meticulously choreographed ritual, every step imbued with meaning. First, the chosen animal must be perfect, without blemish or defect, a pristine offering worthy of the gods. You observe priests carefully inspecting the animal, ensuring its purity. This attention to detail emphasizes the gravity of the act. A flawed offering might displease the gods, leading to dire consequences. The animal is then led to the altar, its horns often adorned with garlands of flowers, seemingly unaware of its impending fate. Before the actual killing, a ritual of purification takes place. Water is sprinkled on the animal's head, causing it to shake. This act is interpreted as the animal's consent to the sacrifice, a crucial step that absolves the sacrificers of guilt. Imagine observing this moment, wondering if the animal truly consents, or if it's merely a physiological reflex. It's a disturbing rationalization for a violent act, making it palatable to the participants. You recall the similar practice at Delphi before the oracle would speak, a recurring theme of seeking an auspicious sign before a significant ritual. Next comes the prayer and libation. The chief priest offers prayers to the god or goddess being honored, and wine is poured onto the altar, further sanctifying the space. The solemnity of this moment is palpable, a quiet before the storm of blood and fire. The entire community is often present, standing in reverent silence, their eyes fixed on the altar. Then, the act itself. The throat of the animal is cut with a sacred knife. The blood, considered the essence of life, gushes out, often collected in a basin or allowed to soak into the earth. The sounds are visceral: the sudden gurgle, the animal's last desperate struggle, and the hushed gasps from the crowd. This isn't a quick, clinical slaughter. It's a public, ritualized death, designed to be witnessed. For a moment, you are confronted with the raw brutality of life and death, an inescapable part of their religious practice. Immediately after the killing, the animal is butchered with practiced efficiency. The entrails, particularly the liver, heart, and spleen, are carefully removed and inspected by the Mantes diviners. The patterns, color, and condition of these organs are meticulously read, seeking omens and signs from the gods. A healthy, perfectly formed liver might indicate divine favor, while abnormalities could signal displeasure or impending misfortune. Imagine the tension as the diviners examine the still warm organs, their faces grave, interpreting the messages that will guide the community's future. This is a profound and deeply unsettling form of divination, linking the fate of the community directly to the physical manifestations within a slaughtered animal. Historians still debate the specific interpretations of various organs and what constituted a good or bad omen, as practices likely varied by region and specific priestly traditions. After the inspection, the thigh bones, wrapped in fat, are placed on the altar and burned, rising in smoke as an offering to the gods. This is the gods' portion, the essence of the sacrifice ascending to Olympus. The smell of burning fat and bone, mixed with the lingering scent of blood, fills the air, a potent sensory reminder of the divine transaction taking place. The crackling of the fire, the plumes of smoke reaching upwards, it's a primal scene of devotion. The remaining meat, the bulk of the animal, is then cooked and consumed by the community in a communal feast. This is a crucial element, the shared consumption of the sacrificed animal. It's not just a meal, it's a form of communion, a way for the participants to partake in the divine offering, to share in the God's favor. This communal meal reinforces social bonds and creates a shared experience of piety. Imagine the scene: hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people feasting together on the same meat, a direct consequence of the bloody ritual that preceded it. It creates a powerful sense of unity, a shared bond forged in the presence of the gods. The disturbing aspect here lies not just in the act of killing, but in the normalization of violence as a sacred act. For the ancient Greeks, sacrifice was not viewed with horror. It was a necessary and revered part of their religious life. It was a constant reminder of the hierarchical relationship between humans and gods, where humans were dependent on divine favor, and that favor often required a bloody price. It meant that death, particularly animal death, was woven into the very fabric of their spiritual existence. And there were variations in sacrifice too. A burnt offering, where the entire animal was consumed by fire, was a much rarer and more extreme form, typically reserved for very serious occasions or for appeasing underworld deities. In such instances, nothing was left for human consumption, signifying a complete surrender to the divine. Imagine the intense heat, the prolonged burning, and the complete obliteration of the offering, a potent symbol of total devotion or desperate plea. The sheer scale of sacrifice could be astounding. At major festivals, hundreds, even thousands, of animals could be slaughtered in a single day. The logistic challenge alone is immense, but it speaks to the deep importance placed on these rituals. You can almost hear the continuous bleeding and lowing, the constant flow of blood, and the omnipresent scent of the abattoir mingled with piety. It's an industrialized form of worship, powered by raw animal life. The social control exerted by these rituals is also noteworthy. Participation in public sacrifices reinforced communal identity and adherence to established religious norms. To refuse to participate, or to actively disrespect the sacrifice, would be a grave offense, potentially leading to social ostracism or accusations of impiety. This ritual acted as a powerful tool for social cohesion, ensuring conformity to shared beliefs. Even the language surrounding sacrifice reflects its importance. Words like hyera, sacred things, or thysia sacrifice were common, woven into everyday discourse. It wasn't something alien. It was deeply ingrained in their worldview. This pervasive linguistic and conceptual presence solidifies its place as an integral, if disturbing, aspect of their lives. As you step away from the smoking altar, your senses overwhelmed, you gain a profound understanding of the ancient Greek worldview. Animal sacrifice was not a brutal anomaly. It was the rhythmic heartbeat of their religious life, a constant dialogue with the divine etched in blood, fire, and shared meat. It reminds you that what seems disturbing to one culture can be the very foundation of another's most cherished beliefs, a necessary act of survival and communion with the powerful, demanding gods of Olympus. Having experienced the bloody devotion of animal sacrifice, your journey now guides you to an even more somber and universally unsettling realm, the ancient Greek practices surrounding death and the underworld. You might assume that grief is a universal constant, but the rituals surrounding how the Greeks mourned their dead, how they prepared them for the afterlife, and what they believed awaited them in Hades, reveal a profound fatalism and a series of customs that are both poignant and deeply disturbing to a modern sensibility. Imagine you are in a household where death has just struck. The air is thick with lamentation, a cacophony of wails and cries that is both raw and ritualized. This initial mourning, known as the prothesis, is a public display of grief. The deceased is laid out on a bier, often adorned with garlands and white cloths. Female relatives, in particular, engage in highly ritualized expressions of sorrow, tearing their hair, beating their chests, scratching their faces, and singing mournful laments. This isn't just spontaneous emotion, it's an expected performance of grief, a collective outpouring designed to honor the dead and announce their passing to the community. You feel the raw sorrow, almost taste the tears in the air, a heavy weight pressing down on the household. Before the body is laid out, it undergoes a crucial ritual, the washing and anointing. The deceased is meticulously washed, often by female relatives, and then anointed with olive oil and fragrant perfumes. This act is both practical and deeply symbolic, purifying the body for its journey to the underworld. Then, the body is dressed in white burial garments. Imagine the intimacy of this act, preparing a loved one's body for its final journey. The bittersweet scent of oils mingling with the cold reality of death. One of the most enduring, and perhaps most curious, rituals is the placing of a coin, an obol, in the mouth of the deceased. This coin is intended as payment for Charon, the ferryman who transports the souls of the dead across the river Styx to the underworld. Without this payment, the soul would be condemned to wander eternally on the banks of the river, unable to reach its final resting place. Imagine this tiny, mundane coin becoming the single most important item for a soul's eternal fate. It's a pragmatic, almost bureaucratic approach to the afterlife that, to your modern mind, feels both quaint and profoundly unsettling. The idea that eternal rest could hinge on such a small material detail highlights a stark difference in their worldview. The day after the prothesis, the ekphora, or funeral procession, takes place, usually at dawn. The body, still on its bier, is carried out of the house, often on a cart, followed by family and mourners. The procession is solemn, but also public, visible to the entire community. It's a final public acknowledgement of the deceased's passage from the world of the living. The sounds of the lamentations continue, a mournful dirge accompanying the slow march to the burial ground. Burial typically occurs outside the city walls, in designated cemeteries. The body is either interred in a grave or cremated on a pyre. If cremated, the ashes are then collected and placed in an urn. Graves were marked with stelae, upright stone slabs, often beautifully carved with reliefs depicting the deceased, or simple markers with their name and a brief epitaph. These markers serve as a permanent connection between the living and the dead, a place for continued remembrance. The rituals surrounding the gravesite continue after the burial. Family members would regularly visit the tomb, offering libations of wine, oil, milk, or honey, and leaving small offerings of food, flowers, or even personal items that belonged to the deceased. These acts were believed to nourish the dead in the underworld and to maintain the bond between the living and the dead. Imagine pouring wine onto the earth, whispering words to an unseen presence, hoping that your loved one is truly receiving your offering. It's a poignant, yet also slightly haunting, custom. The Greek underworld, Hades, itself is a disturbing concept. Unlike some afterlife visions of paradise or fiery damnation, Hades is often depicted as a gloomy, shadowy realm, a place of dim light and perpetual twilight. It's not necessarily a place of punishment for most souls unless they committed grave offenses against the gods, but it's certainly not a place of joy. Souls exist as mere shades, devoid of their earthly vitality and memories. This bleak vision of the afterlife, where even heroes become mere echoes of their former selves, is profoundly unsettling. The absence of vibrant individual personality in Hades makes it a truly disturbing ultimate destination. You remember the Eleusinian mysteries promised a better afterlife, highlighting just how stark and undesirable the common view of Hades truly was. There were specific areas within the underworld. The Asphodel Meadows was the most common destination, a sort of neutral zone for ordinary souls. The Elysian fields were reserved for heroes and those specially favored by the gods, a rare paradise. And Tartarus was the deepest abyss, a place of eternal torment for the most heinous offenders, like Sisyphus or Tantalus, whose punishments were gruesome and never-ending. The very existence of Tartarus, with its eternal and agonizing tortures, painted a disturbing picture of divine justice. The Greeks also believed in vengeful spirits or charis, ghosts of the unburied dead or those who died violent deaths, who might wander the earth, causing harm until properly appeased or buried. This belief added another layer of fear and ritual obligation. Failure to perform proper burial rites meant not just disrespecting the dead, but potentially unleashing a malevolent spirit upon the living. Imagine the anxiety of ensuring all funerary rites were meticulously observed, lest a restless spirit haunt your family. The concept of pollution from death, or miasma, was also critical. Anyone who came into contact with a corpse, or even attended a funeral, was considered ritually impure. They would have to undergo specific purification rites before they could participate in religious ceremonies or enter sacred spaces. This highlights a pervasive fear of death's defiling power and the extensive rituals required to cleanse oneself from its taint. You recall the discussion of miasma in daily life. Its strongest form was associated with death. One peculiar and truly disturbing aspect was the practice of consulting the dead, or nekromantia. While rare, it involved rituals to summon the spirits of the deceased, often in dark, isolated places, to gain knowledge or prophecy. Odysseus, in Homer's Odyssey, famously descends into the underworld to consult the shade of Tiresias. These were not casual seances, they were dangerous, often terrifying endeavors, requiring specific offerings, like blood, to give the shades temporary vitality and allow them to speak. Imagine invoking a spirit, offering it blood, and hearing its faint, prophetic whispers. It's a dark magic, a desperate reach beyond the veil that borders on the truly horrific. Finally, the memorial feasts held periodically after death, on the 3rd, 9th, and 30th day, and then annually, families would gather to share meals at the gravesite, reinforcing the communal bond with the deceased. These weren't necessarily sad affairs. They were celebrations of life and memory, but always tinged with the solemnity of death. These rituals ensured that the dead were never truly forgotten, their presence still acknowledged, albeit from the shadowy realms of Hades. As you step away from the ancient Greek burial grounds, the echoes of laments and the scent of libations linger. You've witnessed a profound societal engagement with death, not just as an end, but as a complex transition fraught with ritual obligation and spiritual peril. The disturbing elements, the public displays of grief, the practical coin for Charon, the bleak vision of Hades, and the fear of wandering spirits all paint a vivid picture of a people who confronted mortality with a unique blend of resignation, fear, and meticulous ritual. Their customs remind you that while death is universal, the ways in which cultures grapple with it can be utterly alien and profoundly unsettling. Having explored the somber rituals of death and the underworld, your focus now shifts to a deeply ingrained, yet often veiled, aspect of ancient Greek society, the world of women. You might imagine a picture of domestic tranquility, women weaving and tending to their homes. While this is partially true, the reality is far more complex, dominated by a series of rituals designed to control, protect, and define women's roles, often in ways that would strike you as profoundly disturbing from a modern perspective. Imagine yourself as a woman in ancient Athens. Your life is largely confined to the gynekonitis, the women's quarters of the house. You rarely appear in public unescorted, and direct interaction with men outside your immediate family is severely limited. This social segregation is itself a pervasive ritual, dictating your daily movements and interactions. Your public presence is so minimal that, as the orator Demosthenes famously and disturbingly stated, we have courtesans for pleasure, concubines for daily companionship, and wives to bear us legitimate children and to be faithful guardians of our households. This chilling division of roles encapsulates the very essence of women's restricted lives. Your entire existence, from birth to death, is a series of rituals aimed at ensuring two primary goals: fertility and the production of legitimate male heirs, and the preservation of family honor through your modesty and chastity. These are not just social expectations. They are deeply ingrained, almost sacred, duties. One of the most significant, and sometimes unsettling, rituals revolves around marriage. This isn't a romantic union based on love. It's a social and economic arrangement. Essentially, a transfer of property from one male guardian to another. You, as the bride, have little to no say in the choice of your husband. The engesis, the betrothal ceremony, is a formal agreement between your father or male guardian and your future husband. Conducted in the presence of witnesses, you are essentially a passive participant in your own future. Imagine standing by as your fate is decided by men, a silent object in a transaction. The wedding rituals themselves, while celebratory, also contain elements that emphasize your transition from one household to another, and your new role as a wife. On the wedding day, you would participate in ritual baths and sacrifices. The marriage feast would be held at your father's house, a final communal meal before you symbolically leave your birth family. The procession to your new husband's home, often at night by torchlight, is a public spectacle, symbolizing your departure. Upon arrival, you are offered traditional treats, like figs and dates, and initiated into your new household. These rituals cement your new identity, stripping away your previous life and cementing your new subservient role. Perhaps most disturbing is the ritualistic expectation of virginal purity before marriage. Your virginity is not just a personal virtue, it is a matter of profound family honor. Great lengths are taken to ensure and protect it. If it were compromised, it would bring immense shame upon your family and severely diminish your marriage prospects. This intense focus on premarital chastity and the dire social consequences for its loss placed an enormous, often terrifying burden on young women. The watchful eyes of the community and the ever-present threat of social ruin were powerful forms of control. Beyond marriage, women participated in numerous religious festivals and rituals, many of which were exclusive to women. These provided rare opportunities for women to gather outside the confines of their homes and exert a form of collective agency, albeit still within a religious context. One such festival is the Thesmophoria, celebrated annually in honor of Demeter and Persephone. This was an exclusively female festival, lasting 3 days, involving ritual purification, fasting, and the handling of sacred objects related to fertility and the earth. During the Thesmophoria, women would perform a disturbing ritual known as the pig tossing. They would throw suckling pigs into underground pits or chasms, believed to be sacred to Demeter. The rotting remains of these pigs, after several months, would then be retrieved and mixed with seeds to ensure fertile crops. Imagine the sensory experience, the squeals of the pigs, the stench of decaying flesh, and the belief that these gruesome acts would ensure the very sustenance of the community. It's a powerful, visceral ritual that connects female fertility directly to the fertility of the land, but in a profoundly unsettling way. You remember the importance of Demeter in the Eleusinian mysteries, and now see her honored with a different, more visceral ritual. Another significant, and often overlooked, ritual was the Erephoria, performed by 4 young aristocratic girls, the Erephoroi. Selected for their purity, these girls would live on the Acropolis for a year, weaving a new peplous robe for Athena. At the end of their service, they would participate in a secret night ritual where they carried sacred, veiled objects in baskets down an underground passage. The contents of these baskets were unknown even to the girls themselves, and they were forbidden to look inside. They would leave these objects and receive new, similarly veiled objects to carry back. The absolute secrecy surrounding these objects and the ritual itself is a disturbing theme, implying a hidden power and knowledge that women, even young, pure ones, could only partially access the Adonia, another women-only festival, celebrated Adonis, a god of vegetation and rebirth. During this festival, women would plant Adonis gardens, seeds in shallow pots, which would sprout quickly and then wither just as fast, symbolizing the short life of Adonis and the ephemeral nature of beauty and fertility. Women would then climb onto rooftops, lamenting the death of Adonis, engaging in ritualistic mourning. This ritual, while seemingly harmless, highlighted the anxieties surrounding fertility and mortality, and provided an outlet for women to express their shared concerns and sorrows away from male observation. The practice of exposure of female infants is perhaps one of the most chilling rituals of all, though it was not explicitly a religious one. While infanticide of male infants was rare, female infants, if deemed unwanted or surplus by the father, could be left to die of exposure outside the city walls. This was a socially accepted practice. A quiet, disturbing form of population control driven by economic pressures and a preference for male heirs. Imagine the silent horror, the unspoken understanding within a family, that a newborn girl might simply be put out. This stark reality underscores the precarious value of female life in ancient Greece. Even in childbirth, women were subject to specific rituals. Offerings would be made to goddesses like Artemis and Eileithyia to ensure a safe delivery. And after the birth, the house would undergo ritual purification to cleanse it from the pollution of childbirth. The amphidromia, a ritual performed on the 5th or 7th day after birth, involved the father carrying the infant around the hearth, formally accepting it into the family. Only after this ritual was the child truly considered a part of the household. As you step back from this exploration of women's lives, you realize that their world was deeply ritualized, but often in ways that reinforced their subordinate status. From the controlled social interactions and arranged marriages to the exclusive, sometimes bizarre, women-only festivals and the silent tragedy of infant exposure, women in ancient Greece navigated a landscape of expectations and limitations. These rituals, while sometimes offering a sense of community or spiritual connection, ultimately served to define and constrain female agency, painting a picture that is both fascinating in its historical detail and profoundly disturbing in its implications for gender equality. You've journeyed through the sun-baked streets of Athens, endured the brutal training grounds of Sparta, peered into the enigmatic pronouncements of Delphi, participated in the veiled secrets of Eleusis, reclined at the disturbing symposia, witnessed the visceral blood of sacrifice, grieved with the rituals of death, and navigated the constrained world of women. Now, as the last rays of the ancient Greek sun cast long shadows over the marble ruins, you are left to reflect on these disturbing rituals and their enduring legacy. It's tempting, from your modern vantage point, to view these practices with a mixture of shock and judgment. The eugenic infanticide in Sparta, the brutal cryptia, the mass animal sacrifices at Olympia, the ambiguous and often terrifying prophecies of Delphi, the secretive and possibly mind-altering experiences of Eleusis, the pederastic undercurrents of the symposium, the chilling placement of coins for Charon, and the systemic control over women's lives. All of these feel profoundly alien and, yes, disturbing. You recall the initial warning you probably wouldn't have survived 5 minutes. That statement, once a playful exaggeration, now feels like a stark truth. Your comfort with individual autonomy, secular governance, and scientific rationality stands in stark contrast to a world governed by capricious gods, communal loyalty, and pervasive superstition. Yet, as you stand amidst the echoes of this vanished era, you begin to grasp that these rituals, however unsettling, were not acts of arbitrary cruelty or madness. They were, in their own context, rational, logical, and deeply meaningful responses to the challenges and uncertainties of their time. They were the very fabric of their society, providing structure, meaning, and a sense of control in a world that was, by modern standards, incredibly precarious. Consider the role of the gods. For the ancient Greeks, the gods were not abstract concepts. They were active, temperamental forces that directly influenced every aspect of life, from the success of a harvest to the outcome of a battle, from the health of a child to the very stability of the state. These disturbing rituals were their primary means of communicating with, appeasing, and influencing these powerful deities. The animal sacrifices, the libations, the meticulous purifications, these weren't just superstitions. They were essential transactions, a constant negotiation for divine favor, a desperate attempt to maintain cosmic balance. You can almost feel the collective anxiety, the palpable fear of divine wrath that drove these elaborate ceremonies. The intense focus on community over individuality, particularly evident in Sparta, also begins to make more sense. In a world of constant warfare, limited resources, and precarious existence, the survival of the collective often depended on the absolute self-sacrifice of the individual. The brutal agoge and the cryptia, while horrific to you, were designed to forge warriors who would prioritize the state above all else, ensuring the very existence of their society. It was a harsh solution to a harsh reality, a survival mechanism born of necessity. You remember the shared black broth, the collective shame, all tools to erase individuality for the sake of the whole. Even the pervasive ambiguity of oracles, which once seemed frustrating, now appears as a clever mechanism for maintaining the oracle's authority while allowing for human agency. By providing cryptic answers, the oracle never truly erred, and the burden of interpretation lay with the supplicant, forcing them to take responsibility for their own decisions while still believing in divine guidance. It was a psychological masterstroke, subtly shifting accountability from the gods to the mortals. The secrecy of the Eleusinian mysteries, too, loses some of its arbitrary strangeness and reveals a deep understanding of psychological impact. By veiling the ultimate revelations, the mysteries created an intense sense of anticipation, wonder, and profound personal transformation. The journey from darkness to light, the communal experience, and the promise of a better afterlife offered solace and meaning in a world where death was a bleak, shadowy certainty. The ritual itself, rather than its specific content, was the true source of its power. And the constrained lives of women, while undeniably oppressive by modern standards, were deeply intertwined with the perceived order of their society. The emphasis on female chastity, fertility, and domesticity was seen as crucial for the stability of the family, the purity of the lineage, and the overall social fabric. The women-only rituals, like the thesmophoria, offered them a space for collective expression and power, albeit within the confines of their societal roles. It reflects a world where gender roles were not just social constructs, but almost sacred duties, believed to be essential for cosmic and societal harmony. You recall how crucial the production of legitimate male heirs was, and how these rituals reinforced that goal. The disturbing aspects of these rituals, the blood, the fear, the control, the violence, were not incidental. They were integral. They served to mark boundaries, to instill fear and reverence, to reinforce social hierarchies, and to bind communities together in shared belief and shared experience. They were tools of identity, instruments of social cohesion, and powerful expressions of a worldview fundamentally different from your own. As you consider the vast chasm between ancient Greek sensibilities and your own, you realize that these disturbing rituals are not merely curiosities from a bygone era. They are a profound mirror reflecting universal human needs, the need for meaning, for control, for community, and for a way to grapple with the overwhelming forces of life, death, and the unknown. They remind you that while the forms of our rituals may change, from animal sacrifice to sporting events, from oracles to scientific predictions, the underlying human desire to understand and influence our world remains constant. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the ancient ruins in hues of orange and purple, The sounds of the ancient world fade, replaced by the soft hum of the modern night. You are left with a deeper, more nuanced understanding of a civilization that, in its very disturbing rituals, found its profound beauty, its enduring power, and its timeless humanity. The echoes of their beliefs still resonate, a faint whisper across millennia, inviting you to look beyond the surface and into the complex, often unsettling, heart of history.